Jude.
Good morning, Vietnam. Oh, no, it's not. Not that's wrong. That's wrong. Good morning, Northern Ireland, and the rest of Ireland, which sort of matters in a secondary way after the dreadful mistake about 100 years ago of leaving the UK. Pat, do you feel you're in exile from the UK where you're living?
Jude, there's not a morning I get up that I don't miss. Know that being under British occupation, I miss it terribly.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'm sure this tells you things about me, and how primitive I am. I was down in Dublin yesterday in the train, and I was looking out at the sunny fields and the just people and farmland and farmhouses and so on. And I got that feeling we got when we were kids, when you'd get in the car and go to Bundoran, and the minute we
Yeah.
crossed the border, it'd go yoo yoo. There definitely, for me anyway, there definitely is a feeling, a different feeling when you're in the Republic and when you're in the North. Do you find that, or did you ever find that?
Jude, I lived in Derry for quite a long time, but there was a friend of mine. He worked in a journal, and he lived in the south. And he was for a long number of years he was paying double tax. Which was deadly serious. It's like the equivalent of the principal accepting the junior teacher's salary because that's what it amounts to. But
Yeah.
anyway, I said to him one day, "Why do you live in the south when you're getting double tax?" He says, "Pat, see when I reach Bridge End, I go," and he says, "That is why I live in the." In other words, that feeling of I'm now I'm free. I'm in a different jurisdiction. There's no RUC. There's no UDR. There's no British no rule that they're a second class citizens and so on. And he was willing, and just Judy, he paid a heavy price for living in the south.
Hmm. But even, I mean, the North isn't a bad place to live in at the moment, compared to in the past. But even with that, I think it drives home to me how good it is to simply look after yourself, for people a country to look after itself, without somebody else weighing in on the side. Um,
Yeah, Judy, no, it's a very simple thing. Everybody thinks it's anti-Brit or anything, but there's something inherently wrong or fundamentally wrong when people on another island over there have the right to decide for us living here.
uh,
Surely, in any democratic society, in any fair society, or any sort of criteria you want to use, the people living in one place should have the right to decide what's best for them.
we talked about this just recently, didn't we, on the
Yeah,
podcast? And I saw a video of Mary Lou McDonald in Carrickmore at the
yeah,
Easter commemoration, and she was almost repeating what we had said word for word.
yeah.
She must have heard about what we'd
You
said.
must have heard of it. Uh,
Incidentally, she's on the Late Late Show tonight.
yeah, I so believe it. Yeah, yeah.
I think for once I'll tune
Fantastic.
into it, especially if it's near the beginning. Okay, Pat, you had a story you were sort of keen to have a look at.
Jude, no, someone. It's just a sort of a more light-hearted one in a sense, but it's
Yeah.
still serious. Sharon Osbourne, she was a judge on X Factor and all this. Midweek, she demanded that Kneecap be expelled from America and sent back to El Salvador or somewhere because they said in their one of their concerts, no fuck Israel type thing, free Palestine.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, she said this was politics and all the rest. So, Judy, that occurred to me. It's okay to kill 50,000 people, flatten about 300,000 homes, deny 2.3 million people water, electricity, food, medicines, but don't say, don't criticize Israel. Judy, what's the priority? Like, and by the way, this woman, I think she might have a Jewish background, but she hasn't uttered a word of criticism of Israel, but she criticizes those who criticize Israel.
Oh yeah.
There's something it's insane. By the way, and I'm going to mention it again because I mentioned it last week. Have you heard a word from Bono or Bob Geldof? And these great humanitarians and all the rest. And I'm going to keep mentioning it because due to the hypocrisy of that, like these people are only they'll criticize the IRA or the safe criticism, but they won't because the Jewish lobby or the APAC and people like that can do them harm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of disgusting. I was looking at the front pages I was saying to you of the Irish News and of the newsletter beside each other in the local supermarket. And the Irish News, sort of predictably, had a main story was about the Pope lying in state and, all the people that are coming to his funeral. The newsletter had a headline about this Republican rap group that were going to be charged with, I don't know what it was, high treason or obscenity or God knows what,
Yeah.
or supporting the Ra for what they'd done in America. I thought, like, which is more important? What
Uh,
Kneecap's done recently, or, the death of the Pope and the possibilities of his
Anyway, Jude,
successor.
I'm not a reader of the newsletter. By the way, Jude, you're going to laugh at this. I was once a director of the newsletter. There you go.
I
Anyway,
can believe that, Pat. I know the way you sit there. Uh, so that
well,
they,
uh,
how did
uh,
that work?
well, you see, I was on the when I was on my other life when I was managing editor of the Dairy Journal. We sort of took over the Daily Mirror, and Trinity Mirror was the operating group, and we
Oh.
took over the newsletter as well. And they had to get somebody on as a director outside, and so I was at. I don't think I ever attended a meeting, but I was a director. But anyway, so on. But anyway, like I regard the newsletter as a joke these days. What was it? These about 10,000 Republicans went through courts and were sent to prison. And when you look at the British soldiers, the RUC, the UDR, very few of them, whatever. But the newsletter keeps banging on about the disparity and the historic, crimes and investigations about, the reason is the disparity was the fact that the establishment, the state, was never held accountable for its actions,
Mm.
but nearly every wee Catholic and nationalist ever got even through a stone was up
Well,
before the court. So
see,
I
this
know
is
I
the
think it's a joke. But by the way, Jude, you were mentioning earlier on about something that you couldn't remember what it was. There's some guys at North, Alex Eaton or someone. He's an MP. He got really enraged about the fact that there's talk about possibly the people in the North voting in the presidential
oh,
elections. He got really, really uptight about it. How dare, constitutionally, they've no right whatsoever to come in here. It's almost as if the Irish people living in the North, under subjugation and occupation, have no rights to be Irish.
well, I mean that's it's a logical position to take if you're a unionist, I guess. But it's also an absurd position if you're saying that people in the North have a right to declare themselves Irish citizens, which they are.
Yeah,
Uh, Actually, I used to be very contemptuous at this idea of the voting for the president. It seemed to be a very sort of thin gruel, really, to the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
question of unity. But I've sort of changed my mind a bit on that. Because if you got all of the Irish people voting for the Irish president, it would help to break that sort of partitionist mindset that exists not just among people among the unionist community, but among the nationalist community in the north and many of the people in the south. So it would have its advantages. Let's go on to a story that's making the headlines in certainly the online version of the Irish News today. Uh, and it's talking about how the DUP is going to refer the Sinn Féin chair of the Mid Ulster District Council to a standards watchdog about the appearance of this Sinn Féin chair at a commemoration of a provisional IRA member, and that was Jim Lina. I think he was was he one of the guys that were killed at Loch Gall in that
I think
ambush?
it's Lochgall.
Aye.
Yeah, I
So they're
think he
going
made
to
a big
go to
memorial.
after him as
Yeah.
the chairman of the Mid Ulster Council for appearing at this. You think that's fair enough? Has he overstepped the mark? This guy by um,
Julia, this sort of thing is ridiculous. And Martin McGuinness was on. Oh, I'll answer this way. Martin McGuinness was on last day. I saw it on social media, and I can't remember the name of the guy. He's very good. He's one of those Asian guys. I'm not sure exactly where it was filmed, but anyway, he was asked what was a terrorist. He says, Mrs. Thatcher. He says, Mrs. Thatcher referred to Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. He says George Washington was a terrorist, the Boston Tea Party and all this sort of stuff. He says the British Army were killing people in my city long before I joined the IRA. He said that, and when I was growing up, I was a second class citizen in my own hometown. He says people like me. He says we decided we were had enough, all the rest of it. So he says, you can use the word terrorists as much as you like, but I am not buying it. And I think a lot of Catholic people, nationalist people are sort of saying, these guys like Jim Lina, as Bishop Daly said a long time ago, when he totally, uh, disagreed with violence, he understood where these people were coming from.
Mm.
That the violence didn't come out of a vacuum. There was a sort of massive injustice, unfairness, bigotry, sectarianism, and all the rest of it. So, Jude, what would the guy who's complaining about referring these guys to the Standards Committee, would they have any problems standing in front of Paddy Menard, or the guy who's formed the SAS? Who committed murder right, left, and centre? Who used terror tactics right across in the Second World? Or is that because they wore the British Army uniform, that was sort of legitimate terrorism, and what the IRA do was illegitimate terrorism?
Mm.
The hypocrisy did stand clear.
Did I ever tell you about the time I was on prime time, Pat, from Belfast?
Yeah,
It was the night that Nelson Mandela died. Uh,
yeah,
and halfway through it to prime time, the announcement came through. And the two people that I remember sitting in the RT studios in Dublin were Flanagan, Charlie Flanagan,
yeah.
and Martina Devlin was the other one, as I remember. But they cut away and they had a whole thing about Mandela's death and how sad it was and so on. And then they came back to the studio and Charlie Flanagan said, I asked Murray McCallum asked Charlie Flanagan, well, how did he feel about this? Oh, terrible loss. A great man, a great man. So sad. And they asked Martina, and she said words to the same effect. She was deeply saddened. This was an outstanding figure. And then they asked me, and I said, "Yeah, I completely agree. I think Nelson Mandela really was a trailblazer and hugely accommodating of the white population, especially in South Africa." I said, however, it'd be worth our while to remember that why was Nelson Mandela in jail for 29 years? Because we'd been talking about Gerry Adams before the thing cut away to Mandela's death. And I said, well, he was in jail because he refused to renounce the ANC, of which he was a member. In other words, a violent, you could call it a terror, well, Mrs. Thatcher called it a terrorist group. I said, but he led his people from that warfare towards peaceful means. And in fact, he's revered for that now. And I said, well, now Gerry Adams actually did something kind of similar. And then I said,
Mm.
oh, no, I wouldn't say Gerry Adams was as good as Nelson
Nelson Mandela.
Mandela. But in some ways, actually, the truth is, I do think there's a comparison to be made there. But it outraged both Charlie Flanagan and
Martina
Martin.
Devlin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was a bit surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised at Charlie, but I was a wee bit surprised at
mm,
Martina, who seemed to echo the same line. Um,
yeah.
but isn't it funny the way people can have, if it's something far away, and I've accused Michael D of this, if it's some cause safely far away, they will be quite passionate about it. But if it's something on their own doorstep or at home, it's a wee bit more difficult for them, I think.
It's forgotten, but Derry City Council, under the leadership of the SDLP, refused to give the freedom of the city to Nelson Mandela
Oh,
way back in the day because
I didn't know that.
Mitchell McLaughlin walked the leader of the SDLP, Pat Devine, and did brilliantly. He said, if you're going to give, Nelson Mandela, much the argument you're after making, he tried politics, didn't work, then supported ANC, violent overhaul. And then whatever, he decided once they had reached a certain stage that politics worked again. Well, look at Martin McGuinness. Martin McGuinness said he was always looking for a political out. And when the Good Friday Agreement, he said that gave the people in the North the opportunity, a vehicle to find their way towards Irish unity. Up until that, it just had been denied, denied, denied. There was no, there was a total false equivalence in the sense that the nationalists in the North were treated the same as the Unionists. Were
Hmm.
they? I'll not even use that word. Basically, they were second-hand class citizens every which way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they're still at it. They're still, as I say, I don't know who it is in the DUP, but somebody in the DUP is going a bit nuts at the idea of the chairman of the Mid Ulster District Council daring to appear at this commemoration of Jim Lina, who was killed at Loughgall. I mean, you could go on for a long time about Loch, but we won't. It's sort of sad. In ways, it tells you something. When the Pope died, Gavin Robinson and I think Emma Little Pengelly, both of them were quite, gracious or not gracious, gracious, yeah, gracious or
Yeah,
civilized, and said, a lot of people would be very unhappy and it's sad and so on. The way you would expect people to react, but that wasn't the case with others.
yeah.
There was talk about a pipe band in Belfast uh, cavorting and playing tunes about
Mm.
no, the Pope is dead, and no Pope here, and so on. And Paul Given and Edwin Poots tweeted, "Having a great day here in Lisburn, really family occasion. It's great to see people in such good spirits." So
Yeah. By the way, moving on a wee bit, do you realize that the Israeli embassy issued, or the foreign ministry, uh, slapped down a couple of ambassadors who had expressed sympathy with the Pope, and they was,
really,
have you noticed? Yeah, and they have withdrawn. There's no official comment from the Israeli about the Pope's death, whatever. And it was a diktat went out from the foreign ministry to withdraw all comments and not go public at all. They said he, quote unquote, he was anti-Semitic because he
oh,
condemned Israel.
that's right. I saw that. I saw that was tweeted. I think it was tweeted by Joe Brawley. Even the Pope is an anti-Semite, he said at the top.
Yeah,
Well, the
uh,
absurdity of that is beyond words, beyond words.
uh,
I thought that was a lovely little detail. I mentioned it last day. The fact that the Pope was in regular communication, if not daily, then something very close to daily, but on FaceTime or whatever, with people in Gaza throughout the
uh,
persecution, I would say, of Gaza.
yeah. Richard, I didn't read it all, but apparently the sum total of his money when he died was €100 or something. He had given most. He was entitled to 300,000 a year that he apparently never took once. He drove a second-hand Ford Escort. He lived in the sort of nearly the servants' quarters. He ate with the staff, etc., etc., etc. There's some fairly anti-clerical people who were brought up Catholics in this country who were having a serious go, about a whole lot of things. I think some people, I think if Jesus Christ came back again, some of these people would basically
I think he was too
crucify him
wishy-washy.
again. Yeah, this sort of thing is if I don't know what to expect. Some sort of superhuman without any faults or feelings or whatever. Oh, I know that there were some of the people criticizing, the Pope. Oh, he's just part of the global establishment, and he's what he called it. And he didn't do this, and he didn't do that. Not going, good merciful Jesus. What do you people think, or who do you think you are?
Yeah, I'm aware of people that otherwise are perfectly sane and actually quite nice people who would take
Yeah,
the line that the Pope was sort of next door to the Antichrist and that he had a deathbed conversion. A
yeah.
deathbed conversion, which is
I,
what saved him. Listen, we could go on about that all day, Pat. I think we'll just
all
leave
day
it.
exactly.
Draw
Yeah,
a veil, as my brother used to say, draw a veil over that. Um, let's go to the 10 million euro that apparently Irish state funds, that's your jurisdiction.
yeah,
They have invested this in Israeli companies who have links to investment in the occupied territories. Now,
yeah.
this was a resolution, as I understood, that had been passed, that they weren't this, wasn't the occupied territories bill passed, or was it not?
No, 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 no. It's not passed.
Still not
No,
passed.
no,
Oh,
still not passed.
well, I thought it had been passed because I looked at what
No, no, no. In
Pascal
fact, no.
Donahue.
In fact, Jude, it's the exact opposite. Apparently, Micheál Martin, or what do you call it, Donahue, he's denied it, but apparently he told some Israeli lobby group that it would be shelved. This is Francis Black's
Yeah,
initiative. And what do you call it? Micheál Martin, prior to the last election, says it basically would have to be gutted to take in. Jude, what they're doing, I'm bullshitting as much as they are. They're shelving it because they don't want to upset the Americans about, we might come on to, but look what's happening to the university in America about anybody
yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't play ball in regard. But anyway, let's drop that for a minute. Basically, the Francis Black's occupied territory bill is on a shelf gathering dust as we speak, and the Michal Martin and Harris and so on say they're actually it's not been shelved, but it has. There's no movement on it and so on.
Oh,
But anyway,
that's
bottom line,
shameful.
getting back to this one, apparently we had 10.25 million or something
Hmm.
on these on the occupied West Bank area. But apparently, according to what is it? They have they remain involved in banks as far as I remember these
Hmm.
investments.
Hmm.
But now apparently it's down to someone like 1.25 million. Michael McGrath, who in fairness was a fairly decent guy,
Yeah.
he introduced some sort of legislation to bring investments down,
Hmm.
and it's now down to 1.2. But Matt Carthy, who's the Sinn Féin spokesman, asked the last day just how much investment is there really, or is this a sort of a cover up? And I would like to know the same.
Well, Frances Black herself has said Ireland needs to ensure that it immediately ends any trade with or investments in Israel's illegal settlement in line with the International Criminal Court advisory opinion of last year. So the Occupied
Yeah,
Territories Bill may not have been passed, but the International Criminal Court knows for sure what's going on in Gaza, and they have urged
yeah.
people not to be involved in that. Francis Black has been trying to get that bill passed, I'd say, for about 6 years now. And they
At least,
continually find ways of frustrating her intentions. It's sort
yeah,
of shameful. But if you listen, here's what Pascal Donoghu said when they confronted him with it. He said, "Indeed, it is not clear as to the outcome such companies derive from activities in the occupied Palestinian territories." George Orwell used to say, when you have language that is mangled and meaning really means nothing and is
yeah,
theoretical to the point where it's no contact with the real world, then you know the
yeah.
person's, if not lying, they're trying to deceive you. And that's exactly what Pascal Donoghu is doing there. Indeed, it is not clear as to the outcome such companies derive from the activities. By the time you get to the end of the sentence, you say, forget it, Pascal.
Aye,
We've heard enough. Heard enough.
yeah.
Anyway, okay, let's go on and talk about that good man, Donald Trump, who has, I mean, we know he's got loads of. I was looking at a thing online and it reminded us of that. Remember that coin, that meme coin? That
I
the
mean,
very
aye,
first thing he did when he became president. And his head is on it. It's like the way they
aye,
used to have George V or Queen Elizabeth or
aye.
whoever on the coins. He's royalty.
Aye. Someone, there's a terrible conflict of interest. The man is shameless. Dude, what do you call, he has invited the people who invested in us, 220 of them, to a private dinner or something, and they're
Yeah.
going to have him, and those who buy more. Dude, Jimmy Carter, when he became president, to avoid any conflict of interest, he put his peanut farm into what do you call it, one of them hidden sort of things, so he could have no say in it. Donald Trump, his business, there's a total conflict of interest between his presidency and his private business interests. Uh, there was something on social media the other day. One of the big entertainment companies, like Columbia or someone, said, how can we get in with the president? And apparently they said, do something on Donny Jr., do a big program on him and so on. Apparently, one of the big studios done 150 million thing on Melania Trump and so on. Dude, they're running, it's grifter stuff. They're running America as if it's sort of a private company.
Uh-huh. I thought it was illegal. I thought it was illegal. I thought the
So
deal
so
was
is everybody else.
if you became president, or actually the same thing would be Britain, and I guess maybe the same thing in Taoiseach in Dublin, that if you had a business enterprise, then you passed that off to somebody else and had no contact with it during the time
Yeah,
you were president or Taoiseach or prime minister.
yeah,
But that doesn't seem to obtain with these guys. If you recall, well, number one, this meme coin of Trump's, it went
yeah,
up at 220. Oh no, it more than doubled, I think, or doubled within hours of him becoming president because he was, making it clear all around, almost holding it up when he was first
yeah.
interviewed. And then, of course, there's a famous occasion when Elon Musk got about a dozen Teslas in the driveway of the
Uh,
Oval Office area. and the White House. And he then, I even went along with Musk and said, "Oh, geez, a great car. Can I sit inside it?" And he sat and said, "Oh, it's all electric. It's amazing." It really was
Right.
like a cheap
Even
second-hand car
stop
salesman.
you there. It's unbelievable. What about Ford? What about Chevrolet? What about all the other cars? Here, Elon, he was using Elon Musk as mucker the president flogging cars for Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Surely there's a conflict of interest there with all the other car makers.
Of course there is. Well, apparently there was a sharp rise since Donald, had these people, 220 of them, as you say, in to have a big sort of a meal and confab with the president. But the same report points out that it still is well down from what it was immediately after he came in, which would be a hopeful sign because that would suggest the American people are beginning to see what's going on here. I think that's maybe because they're beginning to feel the problem in their pockets because of what Trump is doing.
Exactly.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So somebody has said that it's a shameful conflict of interests, and that just about sums it up, really.
Dude, moving on a bit, I was reading a wee bit. Hey, see China. You know, at the start, everybody said, Xi Jinping or whatever his name is. I can
Yeah,
never pronounce that. You know, you know the thing about the Chinese, they think about not just 20 minutes ahead, they think about 20 years ahead.
yeah,
And apparently, they had a strategy worked out about what they knew what Trump was going to do, and and the strategy is they were right away they were going to respond right away to America first off, no matter what the cost. Secondly, they were going to explore opportunities, in other markets, and thirdly, they were going to spur on domestic consumption. And this week, Trump. This is how well it's working. Trump this week claimed that there are talks going on with China and he will drop down the tariffs. The Chinese foreign ministry have said fake news. There's absolutely no talks going on whatsoever, and so on. And they're basically saying until Trump acts in a rational way, etc., etc., etc. Right, Jude, look at the other thing. China has now moved. There's one of these surveys done. China has now moved ahead in reputational ways ahead of America as a stable partnership. They have gone. China and the EU are exploring big time an increased relationship. The Chinese have dropped a whole lot of things, and they're going to, I think, improve human rights. Canada is looking big time to explore its relationship with the EU. China has also visited the Jinping has joined. I think it's Japan, Vietnam, and all other countries around. And Jude, so the Chinese are actually being very, very clever. And Jude, the Chinese, and my final point, the Chinese are now I think a lot of the world's impressed by the fact that they have stood up. You know, this the supine obsequiousness or sycophancy of people like Macron and Starmer. Here's an invite for a state visit. Absolute bollocks, dude. And they still got slammed in the teeth. China said bugger off, and
uh,
now Trump is the one that's looking to crawl out. I
in
think
fact,
it's I admire the Chinese tremendously.
and he said that in fact that they will do a deal with China, and they're talking about lowering these tariffs already that they've slapped onto China. I think Trump realizes that he's not going to get anywhere with this, but actually, I think, as you implied, the damage has been done. People,
Yeah.
other countries like our other units like the EU, like Australia, like Canada, are looking for ways that they can work together. And no better man than I hope the next Prime Minister of Canada, our friend whose people are from Mayo,
Mark
Mark
Carney,
Carney.
three out of
Uh,
his four grandparents are Irish.
so
Born
good,
on
good for
born on
us.
the island of Ireland.
Well,
Yeah.
if there was a man I would trust with my millions that I have in my vault at present, it would be Mark Carney because he looks like a guy who knows a thing. Well, he is a guy who knows a thing or two about money and knows a thing or two
I
about
Well,
government
the
policy.
Chinese are saying until Trump is willing to engage in rational dialogue, they're not. By the way, Xi has acted sort of what I know with dignity. He's not roaring and shouting. He's doing nothing. He is the grown up in the room, not Trump,
Oh,
and
very
that's
definitely.
working.
It's very
Yeah,
striking
yeah,
the contrast between them, really.
yeah.
Wasn't it was it the Chinese who said when they were asked what was the effects of the French Revolution, did they say it was too early to say?
Aye, that's it.
I just thought it was a good
Aye.
one, you
But
know?
that, by the way, Jim, let's move on.
Yeah.
We're on Trump. This whole thing about Harvard, and
Oh,
they attack on scientific research and all the rest. Like they took what was it 500 million away from Columbia to get them to heal. They took I think 790 million from Cornell and 800 million from somebody else.
mhm.
But they've blocked 2.2 billion from Harvard, and they're going to look at Harvard's tax exemption status. Trump said earlier in the week, and there was an absolutely ludicrous, insane from Trump saying that Harvard is now a left-leaning lunatic asylum full of anti-Semitic such and such and such. Harvard did one of the most conservative institutions in America, but it's gone insane. But anyway, apparently a lot of people in America are starting to say, "Well done, Harvard." But here's the thing, Jude: Harvard have 50 billion in reserves. They can sit it out. They can tell Trump go with
Yeah.
yourself, and they
Yeah.
probably have. So, Jude, it's going to be very interesting. But anybody who opposes Trump, it's like Jude, it's the ultimate sort of Hitler playbook. Authoritarianism. Everybody's left, lunatics left, and all the rest, and they have to be brought to heel.
Did you see where there was a spat between Larry David and your man that does the he does that sort of comedy political show. Oh God, can I think of his name? An
Not
Irish.
John Stewart. Not John
No,
Stewart.
not
No.
not not John Stewart. But anyway, there was a spat because apparently this guy who's been Bill
Yeah.
Maher has
Yeah.
been for years, way back to since the last Trump 1.0. He has been really coruscating and critical of him like nobody's business. Keeps on mocking him. But apparently during March, he was invited and took up the invitation and went and had a dinner with Trump.
Trump.
And he reported on it, and he said that Trump was really a very nice man and very good, and he had enjoyed the experience, and he talked to him, and he couldn't say enough about how impressed he was by him. And Larry David apparently came out and wrote an article for the New York Times where where he had this guy going to have dinner with Hitler and coming out from dinner with Hitler and saying, "Yeah, but he's quite a nice man, actually. There's a lot to be said for him." And Bill Maher hasn't liked that one, but what
Yeah.
would your own feelings be? Do you think people should just simply refuse contact with Trump? Or should they try to go there and be nice and find ways of opening channels of
No,
communication?
Jude, I think the days have been nice about Trump and all the rest of it. Jude, the man's a lunatic. There's no nice way of putting it.
You're for it. If
Like
he ever gets flit in his hair, you're going to be up against the wall first, for
Jesus,
calling him a
well,
lunatic.
there's no point. It's actions, Jude. He, he's a narcissist. He's a megalomaniac. He's a total charlatan. I know, Jude. There's no get any adjective you want, Judy. He's ridiculous. And the fact is that the American people and the doormats that are in Congress, the Republican Party, I don't know how they're going to recover from this. They have no backbone whatsoever.
I think the pigeons are going to come home to roost before the end of Trump's term, rather than
Uh,
after it. That's the truth. I really believe that. Now, it might be by ways of some terrible things happening, but I don't think Trump's going to be able to see his 4 years if
Jude,
he
by
goes
the way,
on
the
like
other thing,
this.
one of the things you mentioned there was about the brain drain.
Yeah,
From Jude, there's five. There's I can't remember the name of the institution, but there's 500 colleges attached to it. It's the National Institute for
Is
Health
it
thing
the
in America.
European Research Council?
No, that's the American one. I think it's
Oh,
the
I see.
National
Yeah,
Institute for Health. There's
yeah.
500 colleges, and they're all involved in research. already 1,600 apparently researchers are looking to move out now. That's on the overall context, it's not massive, but these people, some of them, another way it was always the brightest and the best, went to America because they had huge funding, and you could do, young Irish boys maybe studying cancer. I come to Yale, come to Harvard, come to somewhere else. The facilities there, the money's no object. We'll throw money at you and all the rest of it. But apparently now the number of researchers wanting out of America, scientific people, because of the atmosphere, they're the two main outlets apparently are Canada and the EU. Ireland should be up there. By the way, the French have already doubled the funding for one of the universities. Can't remember which one. For anybody in America who wants to come there, with no, they have to have the credentials, but
Yeah.
they're willing to pay big time. So, Jude, Trump's anti-knowledge, anti-expertise, anti-science stance, this might be a unique opportunity for people right across Europe, etc., to sort of say, remember after the Second World War, all the German top scientists went to America. Maybe this is reverse.
Yes, yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is, well, people will, if they're being frustrated in America, people are going to look around and try to devise alternatives. Just as we've seen China and the EU and Canada, they begin to look about what things have we got in common. Can we devise new markets? Just as they're doing that, the same thing applies to this brain drain. If you're not getting have you ever been essentially persecuted in your own country because you won't serve up crap that'll sort of shine and look well with Trump? They want to get out of that. They're
Yeah,
very jealous researchers. Genuine academics are very jealous of the need for them to be free to pursue the research. And it's clear that Trump
yeah,
doesn't want that to happen. And I think if it's like you would say now, for example, about the American international development in Ireland, you're saying, once they settle there, there's going to be quite a job for them to up stakes and go back home again. The same thing I think
yeah,
will apply to the academics. They'll get,
yeah.
they'll find development, they'll be working, and they'll find links, and they'll settle in, and that'll be their new home. And
So,
America will have shot itself in the foot once again.
yeah, just you mentioned it there. The European Research Council apparently has doubled its funding for any the sciences. So, Jude, one door opens or one door shuts and another open. Like I
The,
think, Jude, did you follow on from what you're saying? See, when Trump's finished, I would, and in 4 years' time or 3 years' time at this stage, whatever it is, I'd love to know where will America be in terms of standing in the world? Where will all the scientists be? What sort of will its economic situation be? And what politically, socially, and racially? I would love to know because it's the most divided, unbelievably divided as we speak.
It's also repulsing people. I mean, for example, they say that American tourism, which is worth an awful lot of money, a lot of people go
Yeah,
to the States for their holidays, and I would be one of them because I've got a son there and his family. They're having second thoughts and saying, well, do I want to go to that place? It sounds like a dangerous place. And besides that, I don't want to do anything that would help to prop up Trump. And apparently, if that is carried through, the figures so far show that there's a real drop in the number
yeah.
of people who are going to the States. And I mean, we haven't hit the high point of the year, which was supposed to be late spring and summer and autumn. If that costs the US, well, it's a cost that Trump has inflicted on
And,
them.
by the way, I read the last day, some officers at customs or not customs at the security people are asking for your password for your phone, and apparently you're obliged to give it to them. I don't know what so they can check your messages and your private messages. Jude, if people are willing to go to America and put up with that, I don't know, like so much for the home of the brave and the land of the free type crap.
Yeah.
Jude, that is reaching sort of ridiculous levels. And like put it like this, Jude, me or you right now, I wouldn't advise either of us to travel to America, or because our chances we'd probably land in the clink and be on the next flight back home.
You mean that they watch this?
Yeah, partly. Well, watch us. I'll tell you this much.
Somebody has to do it. It's dirty
If I
work,
ever
but
got my
somebody has
social
to do
media, I'm never coming home again.
it. Okay, Pat, I think that's us for today then. Um,
Yes.
Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your service.